This is an AI-generated podcast based on the article Stewarding the Vision: How Cynthia Harris Built a Faith-First Learning Lab for the Next Generation, written by Andre Blazingdame. The article link is in the show notes. Cynthia, welcome to Kingdom Factor Collective. Really glad to have you here.
And thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. This is going to be a great conversation.
So I want to start at the beginning because I think the origin of a business tells you everything. You've talked about how your own learning experience as a kid, feeling like no classroom was big enough for your learning style, kind of became the blueprint for what you built. Can you unpack that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. So, growing up, no matter what grade I was in, there was just no environment that could really capture how I learned. And instead of giving up on me, my parents supplemented community service, alternative resources, real-world stuff. And I didn't realize it at the time, but they were doing experiential learning before anyone was calling it that. And decades later, that's exactly what I build Career Coaching Plus and Passport to Life around. The trajectory of my education and career just validated the whole system. It wasn't accidental. It was confirmed step by step.
That's interesting. So the wound became the work. And what you're building now is essentially giving young professionals what you needed and didn't fully have. What does that actually look like on the ground? Like, what are these young people doing when they come through your program?
So here's what we're doing. We're not just giving them job skills. We're building an experiential learning lab where interns and apprentices work in real environments. Creativity, technology, next-gen leadership. And the big question we're asking isn't what can you do, it's who are you becoming? Because when they walk out, I want to be able to say, here is someone who can come in and run your department, not just do a job. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I'm curious, where does AI fit into all of this? Because a lot of people are either terrified of it or just kind of handing everything over to it.
Right. And I think both of those extremes miss it. I teach my students to use AI as a tool to widen their lens, go deeper in their work. But I draw a firm line. AI does not will. It'll enhance their roles, but it will not take over their roles. AI is the hammer. Your people still know how to build. And in a landscape that's demanding multifaceted thinkers, that distinction matters more than ever.
I love that framing. Okay, I want to shift gears because there's a story from your time in the defense sector that I think is one of the most powerful things about your journey. You were in what sounds like an exhausting, demoralizing battle, unfair treatment, a legal team, months of fighting, and then something shifted. What happened?
So this is the moment that really shaped everything that came after. I had done nothing wrong. I knew it, and I had every intention of proving it. But it felt like me and my legal team against the ocean. Months passed. I left the organization, got back to work, because getting back to work was never the hard part for me. But I kept pushing the case. And then one day, I heard this voice that said, let it go. And I knew I had to be obedient. So I surrendered. I shredded the documents, the papers, everything around me that had anything to do with it. I called my attorneys and said, I'm done. And as soon as I let it go, everything else just flowed.
Wow. And that's not passive obedience. That's a costly, active choice to trust God's direction over your own sense of justice. What came after that?
I got lifted higher. I got pulled into a space where I'm like, how did I go from there to here? And that moment became the defining spiritual experience that shaped how I build everything. It's not something I talk about as a formula. It's just that obedience unlocked something I couldn't have manufactured on my own.
And it crystallized something for your business too. You've talked about building on a faith foundation, not as a marketing strategy, but as a structural reality. What does that actually look like day to day inside your company?
So my foundational scripture for my business is, whom the Son sets free is free indeed. And I mean that practically. Every product, every design, every team conversation is filtered through that lens. I'll ask my team, how does your design communicate this scripture? And that turns work into worship, It turns strategy into stewardship. Everything I do is in His excellence. I don't know any other way to glorify Him than for Him to entrust me with so much. So I just give it all back to Him.
That's powerful. Faith isn't a supplement to the model, it is the model. You also just came back from a C-Suite for Christ Leadership Summit in Charlotte, and I know that's been stirring a lot in you. If you're talking to a Christian business owner who's trying to integrate faith and work without losing either one, what do you say to them?
2 words, steward well. Everything we have doesn't belong to us, and once that posture shifts, it changes how you make decisions, how you give, how you build. And I'd also say, don't compare your assignment with another person's assignment. That will trip you up every single time. When clients push me to model my platform after other companies, my answer is always, this is what I've been called to do. And then I'd say, think of the long game. God called us to leave an inheritance for our children, and their children. Be intentional about solving problems and having greater outcomes for the kingdom.
The long game. I think that's something every driven leader needs to hear more. Last question. People who know you well say you're always about 3 years ahead of the culture. Where do you think that comes from?
Honestly, it's been validated since childhood. And I think it comes from being grounded in obedience and sharpened by faith over decades. I'm not building for this quarter. I'm building for the generation that comes after the one I'm currently pouring into. And my encouragement to any leader out there is get poured back into. Surround yourself with people you look up to. Find your spiritual leaders. Rest, recover, then go back and build.
Cynthia, this has been such a rich conversation. Thank you for sharing your story, your vision, and honestly, your obedience. It's inspiring. Listeners, the full article that sparked this episode is linked in the show notes. Definitely check it out. And if this resonated with you, share it with a leader who needs to hear it. We'll see you next time on Kingdom Factor Collective.